Sometimes the strangest stories don't begin with a bang of thunder, but with a whisper no one was meant to hear. Tonight you and I will drift through the quietest corners of the multiverse, where echoes of forgotten timelines still shimmer, like stars refusing to burn out. And before we wander too far, I want you to know something simple yet important. We truly care for you here. Your rest matters. Your dreams matter. You are safe in this story. Now, before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Go ahead, whisper it softly to yourself. Then grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get started. Sometimes stories don't begin with the turning of a page or the opening of a door. Sometimes they begin in the quietest corners of time, places so hushed that even the stars lean in as though they wish to listen. In one such corner, there was a child. No one remembers exactly where he came from, or how the air itself seemed to sigh when he breathed. But those who wandered close swore they felt something strange, a tenderness that wrapped around them like a forgotten blanket. He was not loud. He was not bold. And yet, when he closed his eyes, the world around him changed. The boy dreamed in echoes. Not ordinary dreams, the kind most children have of running through fields or climbing trees, but dreams that carried fragments of other lives, whispers that weren't his own. In the dark, when everything was supposed to be still, he heard the softest voices from places no map had ever drawn. Some were gentle, humming like lullabies. Others were sad, trembling like glass about to break. And sometimes, faint laughter rippled through the silence, echoing so faintly that he would wake with tears he couldn't explain. He didn't tell anyone about these dreams at first. How could he? Adults tended to frown at mysteries they couldn't solve, and other children, well, they laughed when he tried. So he held the secret close, as though it might fly away if spoken. But secrets have a way of weaving themselves into everything. At school, he would drift into half silence, staring at the corners of rooms, as though expecting them to open. At night, when other children curled into their sheets and slipped into blank sleep, he felt the multiverse pressing gently against him, like a tide rolling at the edges of his consciousness. And during the day, when sunlight filtered across his skin, it always seemed too fragile, too temporary, like it might vanish if he blinked too hard. He often sat in the park, watching the clouds. They moved with such patience, never hurrying, never fearing where they drifted. Sometimes he thought they knew more about him than he did, and sometimes when the breeze was kind, he heard the faintest hum between their shapes. He would tilt his head, listening, not to the wind itself, but to something within it. A voice, perhaps, or maybe just the memory of one. It was in that park, on a day stitched with the soft smell of rain, that something unusual happened. The boy had packed a sandwich, simple bread, butter, and a single slice of cheese. Nothing remarkable. Yet when he unwrapped it and placed it beside him on the bench, he could swear it whispered back. Not with words exactly, but with a feeling, warmth, familiarity, the comfort of home he'd never quite known. He laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "Are you talking to me?" he asked the sandwich, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Of course, there was no reply. Not really. But from that day forward, he carried sandwiches with him wherever he went, as if they were small anchors against the tide of strange dreams. Each bite was a tether, keeping him from drifting too far into the echoes. And over time, the act itself became a quiet ritual, a rhythm in his otherwise shifting life. Children, as they grow, usually chase certainty. They want answers, rules, directions. But this boy seemed different. He learned to live with mystery, to cradle it gently instead of breaking it apart. He discovered patience in silence and comfort in not knowing. Still, there was one voice among the echoes that never left him. It wasn't louder than the others, nor clearer. In fact, it was often faint, fading just as he reached for it. But there was something about it that clung like starlight in the corners of his memory. It was a boy's voice, not much older than his own. Sometimes laughing, sometimes sighing, sometimes only humming as though keeping himself company in the dark. The child with echoes never knew who he was, or why he returned to him night after night. But he knew, in that strange way children sometimes know without reason, that this boy was important. He began to think of him as a brother, not a brother of blood or home, but of something deeper, something unspoken. Whenever the world grew too heavy, whenever teachers scolded him for drifting, or when loneliness pressed against his chest, he would whisper softly, It's okay. My brother is out there. And somehow the thought alone made him feel less alone. The seasons shifted slowly. Leaves fell, frost kissed the windows, blossoms returned. Still the boy's gift lingered. Still he dreamed in echoes. Still he carried sandwiches to the park, waiting for whispers in the wind. One evening, as twilight spread across the horizon, the boy stayed longer than usual. The park was nearly empty. Shadows stretched like lazy cats across the ground, and the air shimmered with the soft promise of night. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back, breathing deeply as though trying to inhale the entire sky. And then he heard it. Not a hum, not a laugh, but a sentence. Clearer than it had ever been before. Don't fall asleep yet. I'm almost there. His eyes opened wide. For the first time, the echoes had formed words he could not deny. His heart thudded gently, not in fear, but in awe. He wanted to reply, to shout into the air, but his voice caught in his throat. The wind shifted, the trees rustled, and the words faded into the dusk like smoke. But he had heard them. And in that moment, sitting small and quiet on the park bench, clutching a half-eaten sandwich, the boy understood. The echoes were not just dreams. They were doors, thin, trembling doors into other worlds, other hearts, other lives. He didn't know if he would ever meet the boy who spoke. He didn't know if he even could. But the words lingered, looping in his mind like a lullaby. Don't fall asleep yet. I'm almost there. The night grew darker. The stars arrived one by one, shy at first, then bold. And though he was still alone on the bench, he didn't feel lonely. The world felt wider, kinder, filled with unseen connections. The child who dreamed in echoes leaned back, eyes heavy, and let the whispers carry him softly towards sleep. And somewhere, in some other corner of time, another boy was leaning into the same dream, reaching out across the multiverse. There are objects in life so ordinary that they slip past our notice, vanishing into routine. But sometimes the ordinary holds a secret, quietly carrying more weight than we realize. For the boy who dreamed in echoes, that secret lived inside a sandwich. It wasn't much at first. Just 2 pieces of bread, a thin layer of butter, a slice of cheese. He made them the way someone might tie their shoelaces or hum a tune, without thinking, without ceremony. Yet over time the sandwich became something more. It became a companion, a ritual, a soft reminder that he was not entirely adrift. The first time he noticed, he was sitting on the park bench, his small legs dangling, the crust flaking against his fingers. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and felt something unusual: stillness. The echoes quieted. The whispers softened, almost respectful, as if they too were waiting for him to finish chewing. Strange, he thought, as though the sandwich had carved a small circle of peace, protecting him from the constant murmur of voices. He held on to that thought carefully, the way one might cradle a candle in the wind. Day after day he returned with a sandwich wrapped in thin paper. Day after day the ritual deepened. He would sit, unwrap, chew slowly, and listen. The echoes never left completely, but they seemed gentler, softened by the rhythm of the act. He began to think of the sandwich not as food, but as a bridge, something grounding him to the present while still allowing him to glimpse the endless beyond. As children do, he began to speak to it. Today I heard someone crying, he whispered once, crumbs gathering at the corner of his lips. It wasn't sad crying, though, more like remembering. Another day, he murmured, my teacher said I'm too quiet. She doesn't understand, but you do, don't you? The sandwich, of course, never answered. Yet somehow the silence after his words felt different, fuller, as if the world itself was listening. It wasn't long before he noticed something else. The sandwiches never seemed to age. He could make one in the morning, leave it untouched until evening, and when he unwrapped it, the bread was still soft, the cheese still fresh. Once, by accident, he left one in his school bag for 3 whole days. When he remembered and pulled it out expecting mold, it was unchanged, as though time had passed around it but not through it. At first he wondered if this was simply luck. But after the 5th, the 10th, the 20th time, he knew these sandwiches were not ordinary. Or perhaps it was not the sandwiches themselves, but what they meant to him. He began to test it gently, almost playfully. He would leave a sandwich on his nightstand and watch it, day after day, waiting for it to wilt. It never did. He left one in the windowsill through the changing weather, sunlight, rain, frost, and still it remained the same. The boy didn't tell anyone, not even the echoes. He wanted to keep this secret, to hold it like a treasure hidden in plain sight. And maybe, in some small way, he felt the sandwiches were listening too, that they had chosen him, just as the voices had. There was comfort in this strange permanence. The world was full of change, seasons shifting, friends drifting, adults speaking words too heavy to understand. But the sandwich never changed. It was always there, waiting patiently, reminding him that some things could be trusted not to fade. He carried one with him everywhere, tucked in his backpack at school, hidden in his coat pocket at the park, even placed gently beside his pillow at night. Whenever the echoes grew too loud, he would rest his hand on the soft paper wrapping and feel calm return, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. But one evening, something unusual happened. He had left a sandwich on the park bench, unwrapped, while he wandered among the trees. When he returned, the sandwich was still there, untouched by wind or birds. Yet beside it lay something new, a folded slip of paper, yellowed at the edges, as though it had traveled through many hands before arriving here. He picked it up carefully, heart trembling, and unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, hurried, but clear. "Don't worry. I like sandwiches too." The boy froze, staring at the note, the air humming faintly in his ears. For a moment he thought it must be a trick, perhaps a passerby, a kind stranger. But deep inside he knew better. This was not ordinary handwriting. This was an echo made tangible, a voice stepping gently into his world. He clutched the note to his chest, tears prickling at his eyes. The voice, the brother he had imagined, was closer than ever. Not just a sound in his dreams, but a presence that could reach through the veil of timelines and touch him. That night, he didn't sleep easily. He lay awake, the sandwich untouched by his side, the note hidden under his pillow. The echoes came and went, softer now, as though waiting for him to process what had happened. And though his heart fluttered with questions, he felt a new warmth growing inside him. Connection. Proof that he was not imagining everything. The next day he returned to the park with 2 sandwiches. He placed one carefully on the bench and whispered into the air, "This one's for you." Hours passed. The sun shifted. People came and went. By evening, when he checked again, only one sandwich remained, his own. The other had vanished, leaving behind another folded note. This time it read, "Thank you. I'll meet you soon." The boy smiled softly, his chest filling with something fragile and bright. He didn't know when or how or even if the meeting would truly happen, but he believed. And belief for him was enough. From then on, the sandwiches became more than a ritual. They became a conversation, an exchange across echoes, a way of saying, "I'm here and I know you're there too." Each bite, each unwrap, each note tucked into paper carried the weight of a bond slowly weaving itself across the fabric of worlds. And though the boy remained quiet, drifting half-hidden in his life, he was no longer alone, because sometimes, even the smallest things, a sandwich, a whisper, a folded slip of paper, can carry the weight of entire universes. And somewhere in some other corner of the multiverse, another boy was unwrapping his sandwich at the same time, smiling in the same quiet way, waiting for the day their echoes would finally meet. Children often dream of powers, flying, leaping across rooftops, lifting mountains. But the boy who dreamed in echoes carried something gentler. His gift was not about breaking or bending the world. His gift was about stretching, not the stretching of arms like rope nor of legs across valleys. No, his was the kind of stretching that no eye could see, her stretching of the heart, their quiet elasticity of feeling, the way he could lean into another's silence and sense what lay behind it. He first noticed it one afternoon when the classroom buzzed with chatter. A girl 2 rows ahead sat still, eyes fixed on her paper, though her pencil did not move. The teacher called her name once, twice, but she did not respond. Others began to snicker. The boy, without thinking, closed his eyes for just a breath, and there it was, the echo. Not from the stars this time, not from distant worlds, but from right there across the room. A tremor, like a sigh that hadn't found its way into sound. He felt her loneliness, her fear of being noticed, her wish to vanish into the page. His chest stretched to hold it. The feeling did not crush him. Instead, it softened inside him, becoming something he could carry. The next day, he placed half his sandwich on her desk without a word. She blinked at him, surprised, then looked away. But when he glanced back later, the sandwich was gone, and for the first time her pencil moved again, That was when he understood. His gift was not to fight or to conquer. His gift was to feel for others what they could not speak, to make space inside himself so that no one had to hold their weight alone. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the feelings pressed against him too strongly, fear, anger, grief, and he would come home heavy, unable to explain why. But he also carried fragments of laughter, small sparks of joy, unspoken gratitude. It was as though the universe itself trusted him, with pieces too fragile to leave unattended. At night, when the echoes returned, he began to wonder if the multiverse was not made of matter at all, but of emotions, dreams stretching endlessly, seeking places to rest. He imagined that when someone cried in one world, another felt the shiver of it far away. And when someone laughed with their whole heart, that too stretched across the fabric of time, touching strangers who might never know its source. He began to test his gift gently. In the park he would sit and close his eyes, stretching inward, outward, letting himself feel. Once he sensed an old man passing by, his chest carrying the weight of years. He felt the man's regret, letters unsent, words unspoken. The boy opened his eyes and simply nodded at him. The man paused, startled, then smiled faintly as if he had been seen without needing to explain. Another time he sensed a dog wandering near the fountain. Its paws carried hunger, its eyes carried hope. The boy set down his sandwich. The dog ate eagerly, then lingered by his side, pressing its warmth against him. He stroked its fur and whispered, "It's okay, you're not forgotten." Each time he did not think of himself as a hero. Heroes, after all, were loud, shining, celebrated. His acts were small, quiet, nearly invisible, but he felt the stretch within him growing stronger, softer, wider, as though his heart was becoming a vast room with endless chairs, where every sorrow and joy could sit and rest. Still, there was a danger in it. One evening, the boy returned home, heavy with too many borrowed emotions. His mother asked what was wrong. He shook his head. He could not tell her that he was carrying the sorrow of strangers, the loneliness of classmates, the grief of echoes from universes she would never believe existed. He climbed into bed and curled beneath his blanket, trembling, feeling as though he might split apart. And then he remembered the sandwich. He reached for the one wrapped carefully by his pillow. He unwrapped it slowly, the paper crackling like a lullaby. He took a bite, and as the bread softened on his tongue, the feelings eased. The sandwich absorbed them somehow, as though its permanence could hold what was too heavy for him. By the time he finished, his chest felt lighter. He fell asleep quickly that night, grateful, whispering a thank you to whoever or whatever had given him this strange anchor. The next morning, there was another note tucked beneath the empty wrapper. "Don't forget, stretching is good, but you must rest too." The handwriting was the same as before, uneven, hurried, yet filled with care. His unseen brother was watching, guiding, reminding him of something important. Empathy could stretch endlessly, but without rest, even elastic threads might snap. The boy pressed the note to his chest, breathing deeply. He promised himself he would listen. He would stretch, but he would also sleep. He would feel, but he would also let go. In the days that followed, he carried that balance. When others were hurting, he opened himself like a soft door. When he was too heavy, he found quiet places, clouds drifting overhead, sandwiches in his pocket. And each time he rested, the echoes seemed to approve, humming gently, as if rocking him toward peace. He did not yet understand what this gift would mean, or how far it would carry him across the multiverse. But in those moments, small, unremarkable moments of kindness, he began to learn something most people never discover: that true strength is not hardness, but softness. Not resistance, but openness. And so the boy grew, not taller, not louder, but wider inside. A heart stretching to hold the unspoken songs of the world, and somewhere, just beyond the veil of time, another boy stretched with him, the same echo expanding, waiting for the day their hearts would meet in full. There are many kinds of silence: the silence of empty rooms, the silence of night pressing against the windows, the silence of a question left unanswered. But the boy who dreamed in echoes knew another kind: the silence between voices. The faint buzzing hush that lived inside every pause, like static on an old radio. It was in that static he began to hear his brother most clearly. It started on a night when the sky was restless with storm. He lay in bed, listening to the hum of rain against the glass. The echoes usually came like whispers from far-off stars, but tonight something new drifted through. A low crackle. A broken rhythm, like someone trying to speak through layers of distance. "Can you hear me?" The boy sat up, breath caught in his throat. It was not a clear voice. It wavered, as though carried through wires frayed by time. Yet he knew it instantly. The boy he had thought of as his brother. "Yes," he whispered into the dark. "I hear you." The static shivered. For a moment, only the sound of rain. Then faintly, "I'm lost." The boy pressed his palms together, as though the gesture itself might bridge the distance. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm here." The voice crackled again, fragments breaking apart. "I can't stay long." And then, silence. He lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, his chest heavy with wonder and ache. His brother was real, not just a dream. Real enough to speak, even if only through the trembling curtain of static. The following day, he carried 2 sandwiches to the park. He placed one gently on the bench and waited, the paper rustling softly in the breeze. Hours slipped by. He almost gave up, almost thought the voice had been just another dream. But then he noticed something strange. The second sandwich was gone. In its place, a folded scrap of notebook paper fluttered against the wood. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Sorry, bad connection." "Thank you for waiting." The boy smiled so faintly that only the grass seemed to notice. From then on, the static visits became part of his life. They did not come every night. Sometimes weeks passed with nothing but the usual whispers, the usual hum. But when the static did return, his heart leapt. The voice was always broken, never whole. Fragments of words, half sentences. Yet through those pieces, a picture began to form. His brother lived in a place of flickering lights, of machines humming endlessly, of skies that did not hold stars but something harsher, colder. Sometimes the boy could almost see it when he closed his eyes, a world of wires and sparks, where loneliness echoed louder than laughter. And yet, despite the distance, despite the crackle, there was kindness in every syllable, a warmth carried across impossible gaps. His brother was not strong in body, perhaps, but he was strong in care. Strong in the simple act of reaching out. They found ways to speak through silence. The boy would place a sandwich on the park bench, and later he would find a note. Sometimes the notes were only a single word, safe or soon, but they carried the weight of whole conversations. Other times they were longer, though always written in hurried scrawl. "You feel too much, careful, don't let it eat you," or "I wish I could sit with you. Maybe someday," or once simply, "Thank you for believing I exist." The boy kept every note tucked beneath his pillow. On restless nights, he would unfold them one by one, reading them like prayers, letting their uneven ink remind him he was not as alone as the world often made him feel. And slowly, something grew between them. Not friendship exactly, though there was that. Not brotherhood in the ordinary sense. It was more like recognition, as though they were 2 pieces of the same song, humming across different radios, trying desperately to line up in harmony, yet the bond was not without ache. One evening, the static returned sharper than ever, piercing, almost painful. The boy clutched his blanket as the broken words filled his room. "Don't look ever me," the boy shook his head. "Why not?" "I want to." "Dangerous, not safe." "But you're my brother," he whispered fiercely. "I can't just forget you." The static throbbed louder now until the boy feared it might split the air itself. Then softer. "Thank you for calling me that." And then it was gone. He lay trembling, the room spinning with silence. It was then he understood something heavy. His brother was not simply far away. He was trapped, somewhere between timelines, between lives, caught in static that might one day swallow him whole. The boy pressed his palms together again, as though holding his brother's invisible hands. "I won't let you vanish," he promised softly. "Not while I'm here." From that night on, his empathy stretched further. He no longer carried only the feelings of classmates, strangers, or echoes. He carried his brother's ache, too, the longing, the loneliness, the static weight of being lost. And though it pressed heavy on his small shoulders, he bore it willingly. Because some bonds, no matter how fragile, are worth carrying. He returned to the park again and again, always leaving a sandwich, always waiting. Sometimes a note appeared. Sometimes it did not, but he never stopped hoping. And in the spaces between, when silence lingered too long, he would close his eyes and whisper into the air, "I hear you. I'm still here. Don't give up." Because even static, he realized, is still a kind of music. A broken song, yes, but one that carries the proof of presence. And in that faint, flickering hum, the boy found comfort. His brother was real. Their bond was real. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Neither of them would walk alone again. Dreams often wander further than we mean them to. They slip past fences, cross rivers, and wander into lands we never planned to see. For the boy who dreamed in echoes, sleep was no simple rest. It was a lantern guiding him into places no map could hold. And one night, that lantern carried him into the first of the empty cities. He found himself standing at the edge of a road paved with stones that gleamed like old glass. The air was thick with hush, the kind of silence that feels heavy like an abandoned cathedral. Skyscrapers leaned in on either side, their windows hollow as eyes long closed. And yet, it was not frightening. There was something tender in the stillness, like the city itself was asleep. The boy walked slowly, his bare feet soft against the cool stone. His breath echoed louder than any footsteps. And then he heard it, a lullaby. It drifted from somewhere unseen, carried by no singer he could find. The notes were fragile, threaded with sorrow, yet they wrapped around him like a blanket. He tilted his head, listening. The melody was familiar in a way he could not place, as though it belonged to a memory that wasn't his. The song wove through the buildings, echoing against broken glass and silent windows. With each step, the boy felt as if the city itself was singing. Every wall, every stone, every abandoned room humming together in one great chorus of longing. He whispered softly, "Who are you?" The lullaby only deepened. He walked further, turning corners that curved like questions, passing lampposts bent into boughs. He saw swings swaying without wind, doors ajar with no one behind them, fountains still holding water that reflected only stars. And everywhere that song. The boy pressed his hand to his chest, his heart trembling with something he couldn't name. It was not just sadness, it was memory. The city was remembering itself through song. Remembering laughter, footsteps, voices that had once filled its streets. And he, the boy with the burden of echoes, could feel it all. He saw children's chalk drawings faint on the pavement, and he felt their joy as though it had happened only moments ago. He touched the cold handle of a shop door, and grief surged through him. Grief of those who had once locked it for the last time. It was almost too much. But then the lullaby softened, and he realized the city was not asking him to carry its pain. It was offering him its music, a story told in song, asking only to be heard. He listened. The verses came like waves, each one painting a vision behind his eyes, a festival with lanterns glowing gold, a wedding in the plaza, petals falling like rain, children racing down alleys, laughter bouncing off the walls, mothers calling them home with voices like bells, and then slowly silence taking it all away. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but not from despair. The song was not just about endings. It was about remembrance, about the beauty of what once was, carried gently forward even when no one remained to tell it. He sat on the steps of a grand library, its doors shut tight, and let the lullaby wash through him. He closed his eyes, and in that moment it felt as if the city itself was placing its head on his shoulder, sighing into his presence, grateful to finally be heard. When the song faded, the silence that followed was not empty. It was complete, like the last note of a symphony lingering in the air. The boy whispered into the hush, "I'll remember for you." Somewhere deep in the buildings, a light flickered once like a candle nodding in thanks. He rose, continuing his walk through the hushed streets. Though no voices spoke, he felt less alone. The city had sung its story, and he had carried it. That he knew was enough. But then, as he reached the far edge of the city, the static returned. It hissed faintly at first, like a whisper through rain. Then stronger. His brother's voice broke through in scattered shards. "Where are you?" The boy smiled faintly. "In a city that sings when it sleeps. Be careful." "There's no danger here," the boy assured, though he wasn't entirely certain. "Only music." Static trembled, stuttered. "Not all cities. Safe." "I'll listen carefully." the boy promised. The line cracked, fizzled, fell silent. The boy pressed his palms together, remembering the lullaby, remembering the light. He realized something then. His journey through echoes was not just for him. Each place he wandered carried memories waiting to be heard. And perhaps his brother was wandering too, in other ruins, other silences. Perhaps they were both trying to listen to the same vast choir of forgotten worlds. He turned once more to the sleeping skyline, whispering, "Rest now. I'll keep your song safe." And as he stepped beyond the edge of the city, the lullaby lingered in his chest, pulsing soft as a heartbeat, for even emptiness, he realized, could sing. The road beyond the city stretched into a darkness without shape. No stars, no horizon, only a wide hush where time felt paused. The boy hesitated, for even he, who had wandered through so many echoes, felt the weight of the void. But then came a flicker. A small, golden flame shimmered in the distance, bobbing gently as though it were breathing. He moved toward it, cautious at first, then steadier, drawn as though the flame carried warmth no void could swallow. As he came closer, the light revealed its keeper, a figure cloaked in shadows and silence, holding a lantern whose glow never wavered. The figure was neither old nor young, neither man nor woman, something in between, something both. Their presence was calm, like water that had settled after years of storms. "You've heard the city's song?" the figure said, voice quiet as wind through leaves. The boy nodded. It was beautiful. Sad but beautiful. The lantern-bearer tilted their head, studying him with eyes that reflected the flame. "Most who wander here walk past it, deaf to what sleeps. But you—" They leaned closer. "You carry echoes inside you, don't you?" The boy's chest tightened. "Yes, I don't know why." The lantern-bearer lifted the lantern, letting its glow fall across his face. "You're a keeper, then. A listener of forgotten things." The boy wanted to ask what that meant, but the flame in the lantern shifted suddenly. Shapes bloomed in it. Tiny fragments of lives, whole worlds pressed into sparks. He saw a child laughing as she fed pigeons, a baker pulling loaves from a fire, a woman staring at the sea with longing in her eyes. Memories, unanchored, flickered in and out like fireflies. The boy gasped softly. "Are those echoes too?" "Yes," the figure whispered. "The lantern keeps them. I walk through the places that have gone quiet, and I gather the remnants before they fade." "Why?" The figure smiled faintly, though it was hard to tell if it was sorrow or tenderness, "because even silence deserves to be remembered. And even shadows need a witness." The boy's heart stirred at those words. For the first time he wondered if his gift, his burden, was not a curse at all, but something shared. Perhaps he was not alone in this strange listening. They walked together through the dark, the lantern-bearer keeping the path lit. The flame cast long shadows, and the boy found comfort in their rhythm. He felt for a moment that he was being guided not just forward, but inward, towards something inside himself he had not yet reached. "Does the lantern ever grow heavy?" he asked. The figure chuckled softly. "Not heavy, just endless. There will always be more to carry. But that is the work. To carry gently until the night passes." The boy touched his own chest, thinking of the lullaby still glowing within him. "I'm carrying one too, I think." The lantern-bearer turned to him, eyes gleaming. "Then perhaps one day you'll have your own lantern. Until then, listen well. The world trusts you with its quietest songs." They stopped then, for the flame pulsed brighter as if warning of something ahead. The figure raised the lantern high, and for a moment the boy thought he saw another city on the horizon. But this one was different. Its buildings bent wrong, its silence sharp like broken glass. The lantern-bearer's voice lowered. "Not all echoes are gentle." The boy shivered, though he did not know why. The figure rested a hand on his shoulder. "When you reach that place, remember this. Listen carefully, but do not let every song inside. Some are too heavy for a single heart." The boy nodded, though part of him feared what was coming. Still, in the lantern's glow he felt steadier, as if he too could learn how to carry without breaking. When he looked again, the lantern-bearer was gone. Only the flame remained, hovering in the air for one last moment before flickering out, leaving a thread of warmth in the boy's chest. He was alone again. But not entirely, for now he carried two songs, the lullaby of the sleeping city and the gentle voice of the lantern-bearer, reminding him that listening was not a burden but a gift, and in that darkness, With no light but the echoes within him, he walked on. The boy had walked long through the hush, carrying the memory of the lantern's glow. He thought perhaps the road would carry him back into stillness, back into soft cities that sighed in their slumber. But instead, the air grew sharper. He felt it before he saw it, the hum, a low vibration, like a restless murmur beneath the ground. When at last the skyline appeared, he knew this city was different. Its windows were lit, but not warmly. The lights flickered, twitched, glared like eyes forced open. This was no sleeping city. This was a city that refused to rest. As he stepped onto its streets, he heard the sounds. Not music, not lullabies, but whispers too quick to catch, mutters that never finished their words. The echoes here did not settle in peace. They circled, repeated, gnawed at themselves like thoughts that would not stop. The boy pressed his hands over his ears, but the noise seeped through his palms. The streets throbbed with unfinished conversations, with footsteps that never reached their end, with sighs that never calmed. Every wall buzzed with insomnia. He whispered to the dark, "Why can't you sleep?" For a moment the hum grew louder, almost as if the city had heard him. Then it fractured, breaking into countless overlapping voices. "I should have, if only I, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow." The boy staggered beneath the weight of it. These were not memories of joy or grief. These were the echoes of restless minds, unfinished worries, regrets that circled without end. His chest tightened. He knew the feeling. Nights when the body lay heavy, but the mind spun fast, chasing thoughts like shadows. He remembered the weight of sleeplessness, the ache of wanting silence but finding only noise within himself. He knelt in the street, whispering, "It's all right. You don't have to finish. You don't have to keep talking." But the voices did not stop, and then he remembered the lantern-bearer's warning. Not all echoes are gentle. The boy steadied his breath. Instead of trying to silence the voices, he chose to listen differently. Not to every word, not to every fragment, but to the rhythm beneath them. The way their whispers overlapped, the way their mutters folded together. Slowly he began to hear something else inside the noise. A pulse. It was faint but steady. Beneath the restless words, the city still had a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, focusing on that quiet beat. He hummed softly, a low sound like a lullaby beginning. His hum didn't match the words, didn't compete with them. It simply wrapped around the heartbeat, steady, simple, forgiving. The whispers faltered. For the first time, silence seeped through the cracks. Windows dimmed, voices thinned, footsteps slowed. The boy kept humming, rocking gently as though cradling the city itself. And gradually the city exhaled. Its light softened, its hum quieted, and the restless voices folded into sighs. Not gone, but gentler. Like tired minds finally letting themselves rest. The boy opened his eyes. The streets no longer twitched with tension. They looked softer now, as though covered in the faint light of dawn. He whispered, "You don't have to finish everything tonight. Sleep will hold it for you." Somewhere deep in the buildings a single light blinked out, then another, until the city at last began to close its eyes. The boy stood slowly, his body weary but his heart steady. He understood something new then. Not all echoes wanted to be remembered. Some only wanted permission to rest, and he, the listener, could give them that. As he stepped out of the city's quieting streets, the static returned. His brother's voice flickered through, fragile as candlelight. "You calmed it, didn't you?" The boy smiled faintly. "I just hummed. That's all." "That's all it ever takes sometimes," his brother replied before fading again. The boy walked on, the silence behind him softer than before. He carried no song this time, only the memory of a city that had finally been allowed to rest. And in the hollow of his chest, the hum he had given it lingered, steady as a heartbeat. After many nights of stone streets and echoing silence, the boy found himself longing for something softer. His steps, though steady, felt heavier with each city he passed through. He had carried songs, carried hums, carried the weary weight of memory, and he wondered quietly if dreams could ever offer him rest instead of burden. It was then that the air shifted. The ground beneath his feet grew warm, no longer stone but soil, damp and rich. The darkness parted like a curtain, and he stepped into a place unlike any he had known, a garden blooming in the space between dreams. Moonlight, though no moon hung above, spilled gently across the earth. Flowers opened as if waiting for him, their petals glowing faintly with colors that felt both familiar and impossible, hues that belonged to dawn and dusk at once. Vines stretched lazily along archways made not of stone, but of woven branches, humming softly as though each leaf carried its own lullaby. The boy exhaled, long and slow. Here there were no restless voices, no hollow songs of loss. Only breath, only bloom. The silence was alive, not empty. He walked among the flowers, brushing their glowing petals with his fingertips. Some pulsed faintly beneath his touch, as though acknowledging him. He bent low to one blossom, and as he listened he heard not words but a memory. Gentle laughter, the sound of a child playing beneath summer trees. Another flower sang softly of ocean waves, another of rain on windows. Each plant carried a fragment of peace, small but radiant. For the first time the boy did not feel the need to hold everything. He did not have to keep these memories inside him. They stayed rooted, blooming freely, content to be themselves. At the center of the garden he found a pond. Its surface was still, reflecting not his face but the faces of those he had never known. Strangers smiling, embracing, resting. It startled him at first, but then he realized this garden was not about loss. It was about the moments worth keeping, the fragments that needed no lantern, no burden. The garden remembered them simply by blooming. He sat by the pond, dipping his hand into the water. It was cool and the ripples glowed faintly, as though stars had been stirred into its depths. He felt for the first time in what seemed like ages, rested. Not because he had stopped walking, but because this place carried itself. It needed nothing from him but his quiet presence. The boy lay back in the grass, staring at a sky with no stars, yet full of light. He closed his eyes, and for once he allowed himself to do nothing. In that stillness a thought drifted to him, not from outside, but from within. Not every dream is meant to be carried. Some are meant to be lived, even just for a moment. He smiled faintly, letting the garden's soft hum fill him like a lullaby he did not have to remember. Here rest was not stolen, it was given. And when he rose at last, ready to walk again, the flowers did not dim. They seemed almost to bow, as though grateful he had lingered. He bowed back, whispering, "Thank you." The garden shimmered once, petals releasing a sigh of light before fading behind him as he stepped back into the road of dreams. He walked on with lighter steps. For the first time he carried nothing with him, and yet he felt fuller than ever. The path leaving the garden was narrow and quiet, bordered by stones that seemed older than time itself. The boy walked slowly, still carrying the piece of blossoms in his chest. But soon the soil gave way to wood, and he found himself stepping onto a bridge. It stretched longer than sight, vanishing into mist on both ends. The railings were carved with strange markings, some sharp, some soft, all worn as though countless hands had touched them long ago. Beneath the bridge flowed not water but a shifting current of light, rippling like liquid stars, carrying whispers that rose and fell with every shimmer. The boy leaned close, listening. At first he thought it was only the murmur of the current, but then he heard it clearly, names whispered gently like secrets. Names without faces, names that trembled as though afraid of being lost. He stepped further, and the voices multiplied. They rose from the current, drifting into the mist, surrounding him like a soft wind. Elia, Harun, Isolde, Marek. Each one lingered for only a breath before fading into the hush, replaced by another. Thousands, perhaps millions, passing through the air, delicate as falling leaves. The boy's heart ached. These were not the songs of cities, not the restless mutters of sleepless minds. These were people, souls who had once been spoken of, loved, remembered, but whose names no longer lived on anyone's tongue. He stopped, pressing a hand to the railing. "I hear you," he whispered. "I'll remember you, even if only for a moment." The voices swelled, not loud but fuller, as if grateful. For each name that brushed past him, he repeated it softly under his breath, offering them a moment of life once more. Elia, Harun, Isolde, Marek. The mist seemed to part slightly, as though the bridge itself approved, yet with every step the names grew heavier. The boy realized he could not carry them all. His chest already brimmed with echoes, the lullaby of empty cities, the hum of sleepless ones, the light of the lantern-bearer's words. If he tried to hold every name, he feared he would collapse beneath their weight. The boy stopped in the middle of the bridge, staring into the starlit current below. The whispers wrapped around him, fragile, desperate. He wanted to keep them, to rescue them from forgetting. But then he remembered the garden, the blossoms that held memory without burden, blooming freely without needing to be carried, and so instead of holding, he offered. He closed his eyes, lifted his hands, and whispered into the current, "I cannot keep you all, but I can witness you. For this moment you are seen." The whispers shifted. Instead of clinging, they danced, swirling like sparks caught in the wind. The names seemed lighter now, as though the act of being witnessed was enough. The boy felt tears slide down his cheeks, though he was smiling. Rest now. Someone has spoken you again. The mist brightened faintly, and for the first time the boy felt the bridge exhale. The current flowed more calmly, its names still whispering but gentler, as if content. He continued walking, slower this time, not rushing to the other side. Each step was a bow, each breath a prayer, each whisper a reminder that even forgotten names could still find a voice. When he reached the far edge of the bridge, the mist thickened, hiding what lay ahead. The boy turned back once more, listening to the faint murmur behind him. It was softer now. Not empty, never empty, but at peace, and he whispered one last time, "I'll carry you in silence." Then he stepped forward, leaving the bridge of forgotten names behind. The mist after the bridge clung to him like a veil, heavy with silence. Each step felt uncertain, as though the ground might vanish if he placed his foot too firmly. Yet, as always, the path revealed itself at the moment he needed it. Through the haze, a house emerged. Not grand, not crumbling, simply there. Its walls were pale, its roof low, its windows dim with a soft, steady glow. It did not look abandoned nor alive. It looked like something waiting. The boy approached cautiously. The door creaked as he pushed it open, but not from age. It creaked like a sigh. Inside, the house was empty. No furniture, no warmth, only long halls lined with mirrors. They faced each other across the narrow space, reflecting endlessly, until his own face multiplied into 1,000 tiny versions of himself. The boy hesitated. He had seen many strange places, but this one felt different. This one was not asking him to listen. It was asking him to look. He stepped closer to the nearest mirror. His reflection stared back, hair tousled, eyes wide, shoulders hunched with the quiet weight of the echoes he carried. He lifted his hand. His reflection did the same. Ordinary, familiar. But in the next mirror, the reflection was different. There, he looked older. His eyes softer, his hair streaked with silver light as though he had carried echoes for many years. His reflection smiled faintly as if to say, "You will endure this. You will not break." The boy shivered. He moved to another mirror. This one showed him as smaller, younger, a child, before the echoes had ever come, when his dreams were simple and his nights unburdened. The boy in the mirror laughed, running barefoot through grass unseen, free of memory, free of weight. Tears pricked his eyes. He pressed his palm to the glass, longing for that simplicity. But the child only tilted his head, as if wondering why the older boy looked so sad. He turned to the next, and this reflection was stranger still. In it, his chest glowed faintly, as though a lantern burned within him, its light spilling through his ribs. He looked weary, yes, but radiant too, like someone who had made peace with the burden of listening. The boy drew back, unsettled yet drawn to the warmth in that image. He walked further down the hall, mirror after mirror, each showing some version of himself. Lonely, joyful, broken, whole. Some reflections whispered softly when he leaned close. Others turned their heads without his movement, refusing to meet his eyes. One reflection spoke clearly. "You are not just a listener of echoes. You are an echo yourself." The boy froze. His reflection was calm, unblinking, waiting. He whispered, "What does that mean?" The reflection only smiled, fading as if swallowed by the glass. The boy staggered back, heart pounding. The hall stretched endlessly, filled with selves he did not fully know. And for the first time he wondered, had he been carrying echoes, or had echoes been carrying him? At the far end of the hall, a final mirror glowed brighter than the rest. He approached slowly, feeling its pull. In it, he did not see himself at all. He saw his brother. His brother stood in a place of shifting static, his face blurred but his presence unmistakable. The boy pressed his hands against the mirror, desperate, whispering, "Can you hear me?" The figure in the mirror tilted his head, For a moment the static cleared, and his brother's voice reached him faintly. "You're closer than you think." Then the image shattered, not the glass, but the reflection itself, falling away like water breaking into ripples. The boy was left staring at nothing but his own wide-eyed face once more. He leaned against the wall, breathing slow, trembling. The house had not harmed him, but it had reminded him of something he could not ignore, that the journey was not only through forgotten cities and lost gardens. It was through himself and some echoes, lived inside him deeper than any city's song. He turned away from the mirrors, stepping back into the mist. The door closed softly behind him, like a secret that had said enough for now. The boy walked on, quieter, heavier, but also more awake. The mist thinned, and the boy found himself standing at the edge of water. It stretched far beyond sight, calm as glass, its surface unbroken as though the sky had lowered itself and chosen to rest there. Not a ripple moved, not a bird crossed. It was silence in liquid form. He bent to touch it. His fingers did not break the surface. They sank slowly as though the lake were less water than memory, dense, heavy, and unwilling to let go. The touch chilled him, but not unpleasantly. He lingered at the shore, and then, like a whisper beneath his skin, he felt it, a presence deep below. Someone was dreaming there. The boy closed his eyes, listening. At first he heard nothing but the hush of distance. Then faintly a rhythm, slow, steady, almost like breathing. The dreamer's pulse. It echoed through the lake's depths like a heartbeat beneath stone. He leaned closer. The water shimmered, showing him glimpses. Not clear visions, but fragments. A face half hidden in shadow. A hand resting against stone, pale and still. A chest rising and falling in endless sleep. The boy whispered into the water, "Who are you?" The lake responded with a tremor. A ripple broke the surface at last, spreading outward in slow, perfect rings. The image deepened. He saw a figure lying on the bed of the lake, vast and serene, their eyes closed, their body motionless, as though centuries had passed without waking. Their hair drifted like ink in water. Their lips did not move, but the boy heard a voice inside him, "Do not wake me." And yet the boy flinched. The voice was neither kind nor cruel. It was weary, endless, as though it had been echoing for an age without anyone to hear it. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked softly. The water stirred again, and the voice replied, "Because if I wake, the silence will end." The boy's heart ached at the words. For he understood the burden of silence, how it could both cradle and suffocate. He wanted to reach into the water, to touch the sleeper, to free them. But he knew instinctively this was not his choice to make. Still he could not leave without saying something, so he whispered, "If silence ends, it will not vanish. It will only change. And maybe that is what silence wishes too." For a moment, nothing. Then the sleeper stirred faintly, the barest flicker of movement, an eyelid quivering, a hand tightening as if holding on to some last dream. And the voice spoke once more, "When you return, child of echoes, perhaps I will rise. Until then, let me rest where even time forgets me." The water stilled, the vision faded, the sleeper sank again into unfathomable depths. The boy stood trembling, staring at the lake's endless calm. He had not woken the dreamer, but he had been heard, and that was enough to keep him walking forward. He left the shore behind, the sound of that steady, submerged heartbeat following him long after the lake had disappeared into mist. After leaving the lake behind, the boy wandered through a narrowing path. The mist thinned and a forest rose before him, its trees older than any he had seen before. Their trunks were thick, gnarled and covered in moss that glowed faintly, as though remembering light even in shadow. The boy stepped inside, and immediately the air changed. It was heavy but not oppressive, like a room filled with whispers too quiet to disturb, yet too near to ignore. Each step crunched against fallen leaves. And with each step, he heard something strange. It began as a murmur, low and soft, like wind brushing stone. Then, as he listened closely, the sound sharpened into words, names, countless names. He froze. The trees were speaking, not all at once, but in turn, in patient rhythm. One tree whispered a name, another answered. And another, and together they formed a slow, unending litany of those who had walked beneath their branches. The boy held his breath. He heard names he had never known, voices belonging to strangers. But then, faint, distant, he heard something that made his heart tremble. His own name. It was not spoken harshly. It was not shouted. It was breathed into the air as though the forest had been keeping it safe, waiting for him to arrive. He whispered back, "I'm here." The leaves rustled in reply, tender and reassuring, as if the forest were nodding, acknowledging his existence. He pressed his hand against the bark of the nearest tree. It was warm, not with heat but with memory, and in that warmth he felt something else. The presence of those who had come before him, travelers, dreamers, lonely souls, each leaving a trace of themselves in their passing, etched into the roots and branches. The boy wondered how many had spoken to these trees, how many had listened. The forest gave no answer, only another wave of names spilling gently across the air. And among them one stood out. It was a name he did not recognize, yet it stirred something within him. A name like a lullaby half-remembered, sung to him long ago. He could not place it, but it filled him with quiet longing. Who was that? He asked aloud. The forest sighed. Branches swayed. Leaves drifted down around him like falling whispers. No explanation came, only the continued chanting of names, each as important as the next. And he realized then, the forest did not explain. It only remembered. The boy smiled faintly, though his eyes felt heavy. He thanked the trees, not with words, but with silence, with presence. And in response, the forest seemed to cradle him, letting his name ripple gently again and again, until it faded into the endless chorus. He left with the feeling that he had not been forgotten, that nothing truly was, not here, and as he stepped out of the forest, he thought of the name he did not recognize. A mystery, a soft thread waiting to be pulled, somewhere ahead in the path of dreams. The mist lifted further as the boy pressed on, and soon the trees parted to reveal something unexpected. A village lay before him, small and unassuming, with houses built of wood and stone. Their roofs curved gently as though bowed by time. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, drifting upward not in hurried spirals, but in patient ribbons that seemed in no rush to fade. He stepped closer and felt it at once. Here, time moved differently. The air was thick with slowness, not in burden but in blessing. The boy could hear it in the footsteps of the villagers, soft, deliberate, never hurried. He could see it in their movements, hands folding bread dough without haste, children walking instead of running, an old man sweeping dust from his doorstep, with strokes so gentle, it was as though he had all the hours of the world. The boy felt awkward at first. His own heartbeat quickened from travel, his breath uneven. But as he lingered, his body began to mirror the village's pace. His pulse slowed, his breathing deepened, his steps grew softer. No one stared at him, no one questioned him. They simply accepted his presence, as though every traveler who entered was meant to arrive exactly when they did. He wandered through narrow paths between the homes. He noticed details, the way curtains swayed like sighs, the way water dripped from a fountain in drops so slow they seemed like pearls suspended in air, the way even the animals, cats lounging on windowsills, dogs resting in the shade, seemed to move with deliberate calm. At the center of the village he found a clock. It stood tall, mounted on stone, but its hands were peculiar. They did not tick. They glided, circling the face so gently he could not hear a sound. Hours passed as if they were clouds, not numbers. An old woman sat nearby, knitting. Her eyes met his, kind and unshaken. She gestured for him to sit, and when he did, she spoke in a voice that sounded like the hush of wind through curtains. "Here, child. No one rushes toward tomorrow. We let tomorrow arrive when it wishes." The boy nodded. He wanted to ask questions about how long they had lived this way, about whether time outside the village could touch them, but he found himself unwilling to disturb the softness of her tone with urgency. Instead, he asked the only question that felt right. "Do you ever grow tired of waiting?" The woman smiled, her needles pausing mid-stitch. "Waiting is only heavy when you long for the end of it. We wait not for endings, but for moments. And moments, they always come." The boy absorbed her words like water into soil. He realized then that perhaps he too had been hurrying through his journey, searching for meaning instead of letting meaning arrive. As the day melted into twilight, he lay upon the grass near the clock, his body so light it felt as though the earth itself was holding him. The villagers did not bid him farewell when he left. They simply waved with soft smiles, their faces illuminated by lanterns glowing in the dusk. And he carried with him the weightless truth that not everything needed to be rushed, that some answers revealed themselves only in stillness. Night had deepened by the time the boy left the slow village behind. The path curved softly, leading him to a structure unlike any he had seen before. It was small, almost hidden between two hills, its walls worn with age, its roof sagging gently like a weary sigh. No lanterns lit its windows, yet the air around it shimmered faintly, as though carrying a sound too soft to be fully heard. The boy stepped closer and felt it, a vibration in the air like the echo of a song sung long ago. It was not loud. It was not whole. It was broken, a fragment lingering between silence and memory. He pushed the door open, and inside he found what seemed to be a house, abandoned by people but not by voices. Every surface hummed. The walls, the beams, the dust-covered furniture, each carried a resonance as if songs had seeped into the wood and refused to leave. It was not chaotic. It was layered, delicate. 1,000 lullabies drifting softly together, none overpowering the other, all woven into a tapestry of forgotten care. The boy closed his eyes. For a moment he felt as though he were being rocked in invisible arms. He moved through the rooms, and each one carried its own melody. Some were sweet, almost playful. Some were mournful, heavy with longing. Others were unfinished, stopping mid-note as if the singer had fallen asleep before the song's end. In one corner, he found a cradle. It was empty, but when he leaned near, he heard the faintest voice singing, a lullaby so fragile it trembled like light on water. The words were faded, but the feeling was clear, a promise of safety, of rest, of love whispered into darkness. The boy's throat tightened. He realized these were not his lullabies, not ones sung to him. Yet still, they wrapped around him with the intimacy of memory, reminding him of something universal, that all souls, at some point, had been held, even if only once, even if only in a dream. As he stood in the quiet, he felt a question rise within him. Who remembers the singers when the songs are gone? The house gave no answer, only another soft vibration that lingered in his chest like a heartbeat. Before leaving, the boy did something he had never done before. He sang. The tune was clumsy, his voice small and uncertain, but as he sang, the house listened. And when he finished, the lullabies within seemed to swell, not with sound, but with gratitude. Accepting his song among their countless others, he stepped back into the night, the melody still trembling on his lips. The house behind him seemed to glow faintly, as though comforted by one more voice added to its endless chorus, and the boy realized, sometimes to remember is not enough. Sometimes one must give back to memory so it may live again. The boy's path wound upward until the earth fell away beneath him. He came upon a cliff, its edge sharp and lonely, overlooking a vast darkness that seemed endless. At first he thought the journey had reached an end. There was no road forward, only a chasm so deep the eye could not follow it, and so wide no leap could ever cross. But then he saw them, lights, lanterns, hundreds of them, drifting in slow procession from the mist. Each was made of paper, delicate and thin, yet they glowed with a steady warmth. Together they formed a line, connecting cliff to cliff. Not ropes or stone, not wood or iron, just a narrow bridge of light, lantern after lantern, stretching across the abyss. The boy stepped closer. The first lantern swayed gently beneath his foot, as though it were alive, breathing. It held his weight, but only just. He realized then, this was no ordinary crossing. It required trust, not in strength but in gentleness. He breathed deeply, then placed his foot upon the next lantern. And the next. The bridge shimmered with each step, swaying but never breaking. Beneath him, the darkness pulsed like a sleeping ocean. Above him, the sky was a canvas of stars, yet strangely dim, as if the lanterns themselves were outshining them. As he moved forward, he noticed something remarkable. Each lantern he touched flickered brighter, and within its glow he glimpsed an image, not of places but of people. A child laughing, a woman brushing hair from her eyes, an old man staring out a window with quiet contentment. They were strangers to him, yet their presence comforted him. Each lantern held a memory, a small life preserved in light, keeping the bridge whole. Halfway across, the boy paused. He felt suddenly unsteady, not because the lanterns swayed, but because a thought pressed into him. If these are memories, then perhaps they belong to those who will never cross again. He touched one lantern gently, and it whispered back with warmth, carrying not words but a feeling, gratitude, as if thankful for being remembered. The boy smiled faintly. "Then I'll carry you with me," he whispered. Step by step he continued, until at last the far cliff grew near. His heart was calm now. His fear dissolved into reverence. When he placed his final foot onto solid ground, he turned back to look. The bridge was already dissolving, lanterns rising one by one into the air, drifting upward into the night until they became indistinguishable from stars. The abyss remained, but the boy no longer feared it. For he knew now that even the deepest emptiness could be crossed, not with stone, not with force, but with light and memory. On the other side of the bridge, the boy followed a winding road that led him into a small town, hushed beneath a canopy of stars. Unlike the slow village he had once visited, this place carried an undercurrent of time, a steady pulse, not rushed but undeniably present. At the center of the town stood a workshop. Its windows glowed with a golden light, and from within came a sound too soft to disturb the night. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The boy pushed the door open. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of oil and wood shavings. Shelves lined the walls, filled with clocks of every kind. Grand clocks with tall frames, tiny pocket watches, delicate hourglasses, and curious contraptions he could not name. Each ticked at its own pace, yet together they formed a strange harmony, like raindrops falling at different rhythms but belonging to the same storm. Behind a desk sat the clockmaker. He was old, with silver hair that caught the lamplight, and his hands moved delicately as he adjusted the gears of a half-finished clock. The boy expected him to look up, but instead, the man spoke softly without lifting his gaze. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," the boy blinked. "You were expecting me?" "Not expecting," the clockmaker said, turning a tiny screw with care. "Listening." The boy stepped closer. "Listening to what?" The man smiled faintly. "To dreams. They are not silent, you know. They tick, just like these clocks, and sometimes they fall out of rhythm. That is when they find their way to me." The boy looked around at the shelves again. Suddenly he noticed something he had missed before. Not all the clocks told hours. Some ticked irregularly, showing no time at all but instead pulsing with faint light, as though marking the beat of a heart. "Are these people's dreams?" the boy asked. The clockmaker nodded. "Fragments of them. I mend what I can. A dream cracked with sorrow, another stopped by fear. Sometimes it only takes a small adjustment to let them flow again." The boy felt a quiet awe. "And mine?" he asked timidly. The clockmaker finally looked at him then, his eyes clear, steady, and kind. He gestured to a small watch on his table, one the boy had not noticed before. Its glass was fogged, and its hands stuttered as though unsure whether to move forward or back. "This one is yours," the man said. "It is not broken, but hesitant. Caught between what has passed and what you hope still waits ahead." The boy's chest tightened. "Can you fix it?" The clockmaker's hands moved gently across the watch, but he shook his head. "Not I, only you. But I can remind it how to listen." He wound the watch once, slowly, and it began to tick more evenly. Not perfect, but steady enough to breathe with. He placed it into the boy's hand. "Carry this with you. Not to count hours, but to remember that dreams, like clocks, do not rush. They move in their own time." The boy closed his fingers around it, feeling the warmth of its rhythm. He bowed his head in thanks, and the clockmaker simply returned to his work, his hands already guiding another broken dream back into motion. The boy left the workshop quietly, the ticking of his watch blending with the soft chorus of night, steadying his steps as he walked on. The boy walked through a meadow stretched beneath an enormous sky. Night was at its deepest, the stars burning brighter than lanterns, their light spilling across the grass in silver pools. Each step he took seemed to brush against constellations reflected on the earth, as though he were walking not on soil, but on the underside of the heavens themselves. In the middle of the field, he noticed a figure, small, fragile, kneeling in the grass as though searching for something hidden in the soil. As he drew closer, he realized it was a child, no older than himself when he first began this journey. Yet this was no ordinary child. Their skin shimmered faintly, as if woven from dust and galaxies. and their hair drifted like a comet's tail, glowing softly with every movement. The child looked up, their eyes wide and endless, holding not pupils but tiny swirls of stars. "Hello," the boy whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might scatter them like light across water. The child smiled. Their voice, when it came, was quiet and crystalline. "I've been waiting for someone to find me." The boy tilted his head. "Who are you?" The child pressed a hand to their chest. "I don't have a name. Not anymore, but I know I was made of light. A fragment of a star that fell and forgot where it belonged." The boy sat beside them. The grass bent softly beneath their weight. "And you've been alone here all this time?" The starlit child nodded, but without sadness. "Alone, but not unloved. The sky still watches me. The ground still holds me, but—" They paused, their glow flickering faintly. "Sometimes I forget myself. Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be seen." The boy's heart ached. He reached out and took the child's hand. It was warm, delicate, and trembling, as if the entire night sky pulsed within their palm. "I see you," he whispered, "and I will remember you, even if the stars forget." The child's glow brightened at his words, soft ripples of light flowing outward into the meadow. For the first time, their small frame seemed less fragile and more complete, as though his promise had given them weight. They laughed then, a sound like wind chimes stirred by the gentlest breeze. "Will you walk with me?" The boy nodded. And so the two of them walked side by side, their steps scattering silver light across the meadow. They did not speak much, but they did not need to. Their presence was enough, their companionship a quiet comfort neither had realized they were missing. At the edge of the meadow, where the path curved back into mist, the child stopped. "This is as far as I can go," they said softly. "But I will follow you in the sky. Whenever you look upward, I will be there. Perhaps not the brightest star. Perhaps not the closest, but always shining just enough for you to know I exist." The boy's throat tightened. He did not want to leave, but he knew the journey asked him to. He pressed the ticking watch in his pocket, then whispered, "Thank you for walking with me." The starlit child leaned forward and touched their forehead to his, leaving the faintest shimmer of light across his brow. Then they stepped back, their glow lifting, dissolving, rising upward into the night until they were among the stars again, no longer lost, but remembered. The boy stood beneath the heavens for a long while watching, and when he finally turned away, he felt less alone than ever before. The boy's path led him down a slope into a hollow where the air grew still. It was neither night nor day here, only a dim twilight as if the world itself held its breath. In the center of this hollow lay a garden, but it was not filled with flowers or trees. Instead, it was filled with mirrors. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, stood upon the ground like tall, thin windows. Some leaned against stones, some hung from crooked wooden frames, others stood freely with no support at all. They reflected nothing ordinary. No sky, no grass, no boy. Each shimmered with a surface calm as water, waiting. The boy stepped closer, and the nearest mirror stirred. At first he thought he saw his own reflection, but the face was younger, smaller, with eyes full of curiosity untouched by sorrow. A version of himself from childhood. The reflection reached out, pressing a hand to the surface. The boy hesitated, then placed his own hand against it. The mirror did not ripple, did not break, but he felt a warmth pass between them, like reassurance whispered from his past self. "You have carried me well." He moved to another mirror. This one did not show his face at all. Instead, it showed a hand, his hand holding another's, a stranger's, familiar and unfamiliar at once. The image was tender, and though he did not know whose hand it was, he felt his chest ache with the truth that someday he would know. Mirror after mirror revealed not his appearance but his truths. One showed him walking alone beneath heavy skies, shoulders slumped, but still moving. Another showed him sitting in silence while others laughed, his quietness misunderstood yet steady. Another showed him kneeling by a small flame, protecting it from wind, his patience the reason it survived. The boy lingered longest at a mirror near the center of the garden. This one did not show him at all. It showed a chair empty, by a window where the curtains fluttered softly. He did not know who had sat there or who would, but something about it filled him with a deep longing, as though the image belonged to a memory that was not his yet. "Why do you show me these things?" He whispered to the mirrors. The garden answered with silence. But in that silence he understood. The mirrors were not telling him who he was. They were reminding him of what he carried, and what he might yet carry still, not judgments, not destinies, just truths quiet as breath. When at last he turned to leave, he felt no urge to look behind him. The mirrors did not need his farewell. They would remain reflecting what must be reflected, waiting for whoever next wandered into their garden of soft revelations. As he stepped back onto the path, he touched the shimmer of starlight still lingering on his brow. He wondered what truths the mirrors might have shown the child of starlight had they walked here together. But the thought did not sadden him. It only deepened the quiet wonder in his chest, steady as the ticking watch at his side. The boy's journey carried him further, along a path paved not with stone, but with faded pages. They fluttered as he stepped, though no wind touched them, as if they remembered words long spoken. The air grew warmer here, touched with the faintest scent of ink, dust, and candle wax. At last he came upon a doorway. It was vast, arched, and made not of wood nor stone, but of spines of books stacked together, their titles worn to gold threads. Beyond lay the library of endless whispers. He entered, and at once the sound surrounded him. Not noise, not chatter, only murmurs. A tapestry of voices, low and patient, filling the air like gentle waves. They seemed to say nothing clearly, yet everything at once. Secrets too soft to catch, truths too tender to name aloud. The shelves rose higher than mountains, stretching into a sky that was not sky at all, but a soft, starless dusk. Ladders leaned endlessly upward, vanishing into that half-darkness, though no ladder was needed, for every book came closer when it was called. The boy reached for one, and it floated down to him, its cover breathing faintly as though alive. When he opened it, he found not ink nor letters, but the hush of a voice speaking softly into his ear. It was his grandmother's voice. She had passed long ago, yet here she spoke with the same rhythm, the same warmth, the same pauses that once had soothed him to sleep. She was not telling a story. She was not warning or advising. She was simply talking to him, about the way rain smells before it falls, about how stars seem closer when you're young, about how silence itself can be a kind of companionship. The boy closed his eyes and tears slipped down his cheeks, though they were not heavy tears. They were the kind that wash dust from glass, leaving the world clearer. He placed the book back upon the air, and it drifted to its place. Another called to him. He opened it. This time the whisper was a child's voice, laughing, wondering, describing a dream about a staircase made of clouds. He didn't know the child. Perhaps no one ever had, yet still the voice reached him, as though every soul left some trace in this library, waiting for ears that could listen. He wandered further. Some books whispered like lullabies, some hummed like wind through reeds, some sighed like friends parting gently at a station, and he realized this library was not here to teach nor to preserve. It was here to remind every traveler that no voice was ever lost. They lingered in soft places, between breaths, between heartbeats, between sleep and waking. The boy placed a hand on the spine of a book without opening it. For a moment, he thought he heard his own voice whisper back, but it was softer, older, and it carried no hurry. Only patience. He stayed for a long time, listening, not to learn, but to rest. When he finally stepped back toward the doorway of books, the murmurs did not fade. They followed him like the steady hush of a tide. He carried them with him, tucked behind his ribs, as though every whisper had been teaching him a single, unspoken lesson, that no one is ever truly gone. The boy's path curved into a valley where the air grew hushed and silver. Moonlight pooled on the ground as if poured from a hidden jug in the sky. At the heart of the valley stretched a bridge, long, narrow, and made of something that shimmered between wood and glass. The bridge did not stand still. It quivered gently as though alive, and a soft humming rose from its length. Not loud, not sharp. Just a quiet vibration, low and tender, like the sound of a bow sliding across the deepest string of a cello. The boy stepped closer, and the hum deepened. When he placed his first foot upon the bridge, the sound shifted. The plank beneath him sang, not with notes, but with memory. He heard the laughter of his brother, echoing from a long-ago summer, when the two of them had hidden in tall grass, pretending the world could never find them. The memory rose and fell in the hum, fading into the valley air. He took another step, The bridge answered with a different song, his mother's voice, not in words, but in the soft rhythmic hush she once made while rocking him to sleep. Each step unlocked another memory. Some small, almost forgotten. The creak of an old wooden chair, the warmth of a dog's fur beneath his hand, the sound of rain tapping on the roof while he lay awake, counting drops. Others were larger, like tides. His first grief, his first kindness, the way he had once chosen silence instead of anger and found peace in it. The boy moved slowly, almost afraid to rush. The bridge seemed endless, stretching into silver fog. Each step was both a gift and a weight, reminding him of what he had carried, what had carried him. At the center of the bridge he paused. The hum deepened until it filled his chest. He closed his eyes, and for a moment it was as though the bridge itself remembered him, not just his past but his presence. It sang back his heartbeat steady, alive, proof that he was still here, still walking. He placed a hand on the rail, though it was not wood, not glass. It felt instead like the edge of a dream, firm enough to hold but soft enough to vanish at dawn. And then, as he moved forward again, he realized something. The bridge did not hum only for him. Its song was woven with the steps of countless travelers before him. Their memories threaded through his own, overlapping like gentle chords. A woman's sigh of relief, a child's startled laughter, an old man's final prayer, all of them humming together, endless, timeless, alive. When he reached the far side, the boy turned once, listening. The bridge still sang. It would keep singing long after he had gone, long after others had crossed. He pressed his hand to his chest, as though to keep one note inside him forever, and whispered his thanks. The bridge hummed in reply, low, steady, eternal. And then he stepped onward, into whatever waited beyond the silver fog. Beyond the silver fog, the boy heard it before he saw it, the low, steady murmur of water, vast and unhurried. Soon the mist parted, and there lay the river. It stretched wider than sight, black as ink, yet streaked with threads of pale light, as though stars themselves had dissolved into the current. The water moved without ripples, smooth as a sheet of glass. And yet, beneath the surface, faint shapes stirred, like letters, like words drifting. He knelt at the bank and listened. The sound was not the roar of rushing water, but a soft chorus of voices, hushed and interwoven. They were not speaking to him. They were remembering. He dipped his fingers into the current, and the water whispered a name. It was not one he knew. A woman's name, lilting and strange, spoken like a sigh. The boy blinked, feeling a sudden ache. Whoever she was, the river had kept her safe, long after the world had forgotten. He leaned closer. More names floated up from the dark. Some belonged to children who had never grown old, some to travelers whose footsteps had faded from paths long ago, some to lives never sung aloud, carried only here, kept from vanishing. The boy realized this was no ordinary river. It was the keeper of memory, not the grand memories carved in stone, but the delicate ones that slip first. A nickname whispered once, a lullaby sung only once. The voice of someone whose face has blurred with time. He walked along the edge, and the water followed him with murmurs. Once he heard a name that made him stop. It was his own, not spoken as he knew it now, but in the way his grandmother had once said it, softened by affection, stretched into music. Hearing it, he felt warmth rise in his chest like a lamp being lit in a darkened room. He understood then, the river did not only carry forgotten names. It carried the ways they were spoken, the tenderness or sorrow woven into them. The world may let go, but the river would not. At a bend in the current, he saw something glimmer. A flat stone stood at the edge, polished smooth by centuries. Carved upon it were countless markings, initials, scratches, single letters, perhaps left by those who had stood here before, each carving a trace so their names would not need to be carried downstream. The boy picked up a small shard of stone and held it. For a long while, he wondered whether he should mark his name too. But at last he only pressed his hand to the rock, leaving nothing but warmth. "Remember me as silence," he whispered. The river seemed to nod, folding his words into its endless current. When he rose to leave, the names did not fade. They followed him, not as noise, but as presence, like a soft weight at his back, like unseen hands holding a lantern behind him as he walked forward. The river's murmur lingered even as the fog returned, a reminder that nothing was ever truly lost. Beyond the fog, the boy found himself on a narrow path, lined with dim lanterns. Their glass panes were clouded, their light faint, as though each one carried the last breath of a dream. The path led him to a small dwelling, simple and wooden, nestled beneath a crooked tree whose branches bent low, heavy with wind chimes that rang without wind. Smoke rose from the chimney, but not the dark smoke of fire. This was pale, almost silver, curling into the night like unspoken prayers. Inside, an old man sat at a low table, shaping light. It was not flame he worked with, nor glass, nor wick, so instead threads of light, thin as silk, hung in the air before him, and he gathered them with careful fingers. He wove them into small lanterns, each one glowing faintly with a hue unlike the others. Blue like rain remembered, gold like laughter, violet like sorrow turned gentle. The boy watched in silence. The lantern maker glanced up, his eyes soft, as though he had been expecting him. He did not speak at first. Instead, he finished the lantern he held, tying its thread into a knot that glowed before sealing it into its frame. Only then did he gesture for the boy to sit. The room was warm, but not with heat, warm with presence. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with lanterns of every color. Some flickered brightly, some barely glowed. None were entirely dark. At last the old man spoke, his voice low and steady like someone who had whispered to fire all his life. "These are the lights of memory," he said. "Not the great ones that history keeps, but the quiet ones that live in single hearts." He lifted a lantern, small and trembling, the color of dawn through mist. "This one belongs to a woman who once hummed a tune to herself while hanging laundry. No one else heard it, but the tune was real. It mattered. And so it shines." The boy's eyes wandered the shelves, dazzled. He wondered how many lives were preserved here, how many unnoticed gestures had been woven into light. The lantern maker turned his gaze back to him. "You have your own light, boy. Perhaps more than one." The boy hesitated. "Could I see them?" The old man smiled, faint and kind. He reached into the air, fingers moving as though plucking threads from silence. Slowly he drew something unseen and light began to form. A lantern emerged, glowing pale blue. Within it, the boy saw himself as a child, crouched in tall grass, cupping a firefly in his hands. He remembered that night, how he had whispered to the insect as though it could understand, promising to let it go when it was ready. The lantern flickered with the memory. Steady and alive, another lantern appeared, golden. Inside was the boy, sitting at a table with someone whose face was blurred, but whose hands rested gently over his. He didn't know who it was, not yet, but he felt the warmth of it like sunlight on skin. The old man placed the lanterns beside him. "Your light is safe here. Whether or not you return, they will not go out." The boy's chest ached, not with sorrow, but with a deep, grounding tenderness. He bowed his head in thanks. The lantern maker only nodded, returning to his weaving. The silver threads floated between his fingers, endless as time. When the boy rose to leave, he glanced once more at the shelves, countless lanterns breathing softly in the dim room. He thought of how many unnoticed moments had been given sanctuary here, each one shining quietly, like stars no one thought to name. Outside, the path was darker now, but the boy carried with him the glow of unseen lights. The path carried the boy upward, winding like a ribbon through soft hills. At the crest he saw it, a tower rising into the mist. It was not built of stone or wood, but of something more fragile, woven from strands of silver like moonlight turned solid. The tower leaned slightly as though tired, yet it stood. Its windows glowed faintly with a blue light that pulsed like breathing. When the boy entered, the air grew cool and still. The tower was hollow inside, save for a spiraling staircase that wound upward with no railing, each step made of glass so thin he feared it might shatter. Yet when he placed his foot upon it, it held him, humming faintly under his weight like the sigh of a sleeping giant. He climbed. On the first landing he saw a chamber filled with clouds. They moved slowly, each one glowing from within. The boy reached toward one and it shifted, showing him an image, a child dreaming of running through fields of endless candy. The dream was playful, untouched by sorrow, and it dissolved the moment he smiled at it. On the next landing, the chamber was darker. The clouds here were heavier, their glow dim. He touched one, and it revealed a restless dream. Someone wandering hallways that led nowhere, doors that would not open. He felt the ache of frustration, the sting of loneliness. Yet even this dream was resting here, safe at last. He climbed higher. Each level revealed different dreams. Some glimmered like lanterns, filled with laughter and flight. Others were brittle, trembling, shadows of forgotten fears. Some were so faint they seemed ready to vanish altogether, yet the tower held them gently, refusing to let them slip away. At last he reached the highest chamber. Here the ceiling opened to the night sky, and the stars seemed impossibly close. The room was empty, save for a single great cloud that hovered in the center, glowing softly. The boy stepped toward it. Within, he saw not a stranger's dream, but his own. It was the dream he had carried since childhood, the one where he floated in a dark sea, stars circling overhead, while a voice whispered, "You are not lost. You are only resting." He had not dreamt it in years, and yet here it was, kept for him, still breathing. The boy touched the cloud. It sighed beneath his hand, and for a moment he felt weightless, as if he had stepped inside the dream itself. The voice returned, not loud, not clear, but steady as ever. "You are safe to wander. You are safe to rest." Tears welled in his eyes, though his chest felt lighter than ever. He let the dream go, and it drifted back into its place, glowing gently. He turned to leave, descending the spiral steps. As he walked, he realized something. Dreams, too, needed a place to rest. They were not gone when forgotten. They were gathered here, waiting patiently, until someone remembered them again. When he stepped back into the night, the tower shimmered faintly, leaning like a weary guardian. The boy whispered his gratitude to it, and the silver strands of its walls quivered, almost like a nod. Then he continued onward, carrying the soft hum of resting dreams with him. The boy's path led him into a valley where trees gathered close, their branches heavy, their trunks wide as houses. The forest air was thick with stillness, though not empty. It was the kind of stillness that listens. Every sound, every step, every breath was received, held, remembered. As he stepped onto the mossy floor, he noticed how the ground gave way gently, as though it recognized his weight. The leaves above barely stirred, but the forest seemed to lean closer. Attentive, he whispered a word, just a greeting, and the branches rustled faintly in reply. He walked deeper, and the silence around him shifted. It was not the silence of absence, but of presence. He could almost hear the echoes of all who had passed before, laughter drifting like birdsong, tears absorbed into bark, songs hummed by wanderers long gone. One tree in particular caught his eye. Its bark was marked with faint lines, not carvings but grooves grown naturally, like wrinkles upon an ancient face. He laid his hand against it, and the tree hummed softly beneath his palm. And then he heard it, not with his ears, but within. The sound of footsteps, his own as a child running across a meadow, the crunch of grass, the thud of small heels, the breathless giggle of a younger self. The tree had remembered him, though he had never been here before. He pulled his hand back, startled, and realized this was no ordinary forest. It did not keep only the steps taken here. It kept all steps everywhere. Every foot that ever touched earth left an echo, and the trees gathered them, weaving them into their quiet rings. He wandered further. Each tree he passed carried a different memory, a soldier's weary march, a mother's hurried pacing as she rocked a child, the soft, uneven shuffle of an old man walking with a cane. The boy could feel them all beneath the bark, the forest holding them with patience. At one clearing he sat upon a fallen trunk, listening. The air grew so still he could hear the faintest murmur of his own heart. For a moment, he wondered if the forest would remember this too, his pause, his breath, the way his shoulders relaxed into the embrace of quiet, and he knew it would. He tilted his head back, staring at the canopy. Stars glimmered faintly between branches, and he thought of how many feet had walked under them, how many lives had passed, yet none forgotten here. Before leaving, he placed both hands on a young sapling at the forest's edge. Its bark was smooth, its roots shallow, yet it too vibrated faintly with echoes. He whispered to it, not words, but the sound of his breath, steady and calm. The sapling quivered, listening. And he knew that somewhere in its rings, his whisper would remain long after he was gone. When he stepped out of the forest, the silence did not fade. It followed him, carrying the memory of his footsteps with infinite gentleness. The boy's journey carried him toward a mountain unlike any he had seen before. From afar it seemed ordinary, its slopes dark, its peak lost in a shawl of clouds. But as he drew closer, he noticed something strange. The air thickened, heavy yet gentle, and the rhythm of the world shifted. Birds that passed overhead did not flap their wings swiftly. Each beat stretched like the toll of a slow bell. Water dripping from stones paused mid-fall, then resumed, as if reluctant to leave its source. Even his own breath felt elongated, drawn out into vast, echoing spaces. He placed his foot on the first step of the path winding upward, and the world leaned into stillness. Climbing here was not like climbing elsewhere. Each step stretched longer than it should. Each pause between felt endless. Yet he did not grow tired. His legs carried him with a patience he had not known he possessed, as though time itself had decided not to press against him. On the lower slopes, he passed boulders carved with ripples of motion, images of people mid-step, mid-turn, mid-breath. They were not statues. They were echoes, moments slowed into stone by the mountain's will. He touched one, a child with arms outstretched, running, hair frozen in the arc of wind. The boy could almost hear the laughter caught in the stone, suspended but never gone. Further up he came upon a pool. Its surface held the reflection of the sky, but the ripples spread so slowly that one drop of water took 100 heartbeats to reach the edge. The boy gazed into it and saw his own face, not as it was now, nor as it had been, but stretched across many ages, like a chord played softly across time. He lingered, listening to his own heartbeat, steady as the mountain itself. Higher still, the path narrowed. The silence deepened, but it was not empty. It was filled with the weight of every moment, stretched wide enough to be felt fully. He realized that here nothing was hurried. Grief was not rushed. Joy was not fleeting. Every small thing was given room to breathe. At the summit, the boy stepped into a plateau of white stone. The sky opened above him, vast and unmoving. Clouds drifted so slowly they seemed like painted strokes. Time here did not pass. It unfolded. He sat, and the mountain held him. For the first time, he let his mind wander without hurry. He thought of the child he once was, the journeys he had taken, the quiet friendships along the way. He thought of those yet to come, faces not yet known, voices not yet heard. None of it pressed upon him. All of it waited, like stars still hidden behind day. The boy closed his eyes. For a long while there was no before and no after, only this breath stretched into eternity. When he finally rose, the descent felt easier, lighter. Time resumed its gentle flow as he stepped down, but something within him remained slowed, softened, as though he had learned how not to rush. The mountain stood behind him, eternal, a guardian of stretched moments, and he carried its lesson with him, that sometimes time does not need to move forward. Sometimes it only needs to widen. After leaving the mountain, the boy followed a path that sloped gently toward the sound of water. It was not the murmur of an ordinary river or sea, but something brighter, like the hushed clinking of glass beads, like the faint shimmer of bells across the horizon. At last he reached the shore. The sand beneath his feet was dark, almost black, yet speckled with countless flecks of light. They twinkled faintly, as though the night sky itself had spilled down and scattered across the earth. The waves rolled in slowly, and with each retreat, they left behind something extraordinary, fragments of stars. Some were small, no larger than pebbles, glowing with a faint pulse warm to the touch. Others were sharp and crystalline, humming softly when held. A few were round and smooth like pearls that had swallowed moonlight. The boy knelt, letting the surf wash over his hands. He picked up one star fragment, and it flickered at his touch, revealing a memory not his own. Two strangers laughing in the glow of a lantern, their joy tucked safely inside the shard. He placed it gently back upon the shore, and it pulsed once more before settling into stillness. He realized then that these fragments were not fallen stars at all. They were pieces of lives, moments so radiant that the universe could not let them vanish. Instead, they had washed ashore here, waiting for someone to notice. He walked slowly along the tide, gathering fragments in his palms. One showed a child's first step. Another held the trembling hands of two lovers reaching across a table. Another contained silence, the silence of two friends sitting side by side, speaking nothing, yet saying everything. The boy's heart swelled. These were not grand victories or great histories. They were small glowing truths, shards of light scattered across the sea of existence. At the far end of the beach he found a larger fragment, half buried in sand. It shone brighter than the rest, its glow steady like a steady flame. When he touched it, he saw himself, not as he was now but years from now, sitting beneath a tree, older, quieter, smiling at the sky. He did not fear the vision. Instead, he felt a deep calm. The fragment pulsed once as though nodding, and then dimmed, slipping back into the sand. The boy sat at the shoreline for a long time, watching the waves gather and retreat, gathering more light with each cycle. He thought of how many lives had brushed against this shore, how many unspoken joys were hidden in these fragments. When he rose, he carried none of them with him. He left them where they belonged, for others to find, for the sea to return, for the stars to reclaim when the time was right. The sand glowed faintly beneath his feet as he walked away, as though blessing his steps with scattered starlight. Beyond the glowing shoreline, the boy followed a winding trail where the wind seemed to hum, low and steady, as though guiding him forward. The path curved between tall reeds that whispered secrets when brushed by the breeze. And at the end of this path, standing quietly in a hollow, was a house. It was neither large nor small, built of pale wood that seemed to sigh with age. Its windows glowed faintly, though no lamp burned within. The door was slightly ajar, waiting. When he stepped across the threshold, the air changed. It was not silent, nor was it loud. Instead, the room seemed filled with something softer than sound, like voices spoken long ago, suspended in the air, waiting to be heard again. The boy paused, and then it came, a gentle laugh, his mother's years before, calling him in from play. The creak of a chair as his father leaned back after a long day. A murmur of friends who once whispered secrets beneath blankets, swearing never to forget. Each sound was delicate but whole, not distorted, not fading, perfect echoes of moments that had slipped past, now returning as if the house had kept them safe. He wandered deeper, his hand brushing along the smooth wooden wall. Every touch called forth something different. A song hummed by a stranger he had once passed in a market, a kind word spoken by a teacher, nearly forgotten, even the soft sound of his own footsteps from years ago, chasing butterflies across a hill. The boy's eyes stung, though he did not weep. It was not sorrow that filled him, it was gratitude. The realization that nothing was truly lost, that even the smallest kindness, the briefest sound, might still be living, carried forward by some gentle keeper. In the farthest room, he found a chair carved with stars along its back. He sat, and for a long time he listened, not just to his own echoes but to countless others. A lullaby in a language he did not know. The steady beat of someone chopping wood. The faint mewl of a cat long gone, all of it layered together, soft as snowfall, weaving a music that no composer could write. And then he understood. This house was not meant to keep the past alive. It was meant to remind those who entered that they had mattered, even in the smallest ways. That every laugh, every whisper, every murmur of care had been received by the world and remembered, even if people forgot. When the boy finally stood, the house seemed to sigh, as though pleased he had listened. He touched the doorframe as he stepped out, and behind him the echoes faded into stillness, until only the wind remained. The night was clear. He carried those voices in his heart, not as weight but as warmth. A reminder that we are all more lasting than we know. The path ahead curved toward a river, wide and dark, gliding beneath a sky that shimmered with faint streaks of silver. The boy stood at its edge, listening. The water did not roar or rush. It moved with the quiet rhythm of breath, as though the river itself were dreaming. Across the span, he saw no stone bridge, no wooden planks. Instead, there was something stranger, softer, a great arc of birds, shoulder to wing, stretching across the river. They were vast, larger than any he had seen, yet they slept. Heads tucked gently beneath wings, bodies resting in perfect stillness. Their feathers glowed faintly, casting ripples of pale light upon the dark current below. It did not seem possible that they could bear the weight of a traveler. And yet the boy sensed no danger. He felt the pull of trust, as though the world itself invited him to walk. He stepped onto the first bird, its back rising and falling with deep, unbroken sleep. It did not stir. The feathers beneath his feet were softer than grass, yet steady as stone. With each step he felt something stir within himself, memories of his own sleep, the dreams that had cradled him as a child. He remembered curling against a pillow, hearing rain against the window, drifting into worlds that faded with the dawn. He remembered the gentle weight of safety that came when someone whispered good night. The bridge seemed to hold not just birds, but every dream ever dreamed in kindness. Halfway across, the boy paused. He looked down at the river, its surface catching the reflections of the sleeping creatures. And for a moment he wondered, were the birds dreaming him too? Was he only a part of their dream, crossing to a shore that existed because they believed it so? The thought did not frighten him. Instead, it softened him. He realized that perhaps everything, his steps, his breaths, his hopes, was stitched together by countless unseen dreams, carried by others who never knew his name. When he reached the far side, he turned once more. The birds still slept unmoving, the arc of their bodies glowing against the dark. He whispered a thank you, though he knew they would not hear. Or perhaps they would within their dreams. As he stepped onto solid earth again, the air seemed lighter, touched by a hush deeper than silence. The boy carried forward the certainty that rest itself was a bridge, that even in stillness, the world was being carried onward by unseen wings. The boy's steps carried him into a valley where the air smelled of earth after rain, sweet, steady, timeless. Ahead, spread across the hollow, was an orchard. Its trees were neither young nor ancient, yet they seemed to breathe with a presence older than mountains. Each tree leaned slightly in a different direction, as though bowing toward something unseen. Their bark was pale, their branches curved, and their leaves shimmered with faint silver veins. But it was not the leaves that stilled the boy's heart. It was what hung from the branches. Instead of fruit, each bough carried soft pendants of light, round and translucent, glowing with a pulse like a heartbeat. He drew closer, and within the glow he saw something inscribed, shapes, lines, and sounds, names, some he recognized, whispers of his village, friends, even faces long since faded. Others were entirely strange, belonging to people he would never meet. Names spoken once carried on the wind, now preserved like lanterns swaying in the orchard. He reached out to touch one. It shivered, glowing brighter, and a voice drifted faintly through the air. A woman's laughter, clear and quick, though he did not know her. The name pulsed softly, as if remembering itself, and then quieted. The boy wandered between the trees, his fingertips brushing gently against glowing orbs. Each time a memory flickered to life, not full stories, just fragments. The cry of an infant, a song hummed in the dark, a farewell whispered at a door. Names that might have been forgotten elsewhere lived here, nourished by the orchard's patient roots. He wondered then about his own name. Would it someday hang among these branches? Would it glow quietly, holding pieces of him? His laughter, his kindness, his small acts that might outlive him in faint ripples? The thought did not sadden him. Instead, it filled him with peace. To be remembered, even as a faint lantern in some far-off grove, felt like enough. At the center of the orchard stood the tallest tree of all. Its branches stretched wide, carrying thousands of glowing names. The boy sat beneath it, resting his back against its trunk. Above him, the light swayed gently, filling the air with the soft murmur of countless lives blending into one vast, quiet song. And he understood then, no one was ever truly lost. Every name spoken with love, every person once cherished, remained rooted in the orchard's embrace. When he rose again, he whispered his own name into the bark. Not loudly, not in demand, just a gift. The tree seemed to breathe in, holding it gently, adding it to the song. The boy left the valley slowly, carrying the orchard within him, the sense that to live, to be loved even once, was to never be forgotten. The boy walked until the world itself seemed to grow thinner, as if each step carried him toward the edge of a dream. The air shimmered faintly, golden and quiet, and before him opened a garden. It was not vast nor heavy with grandeur. It was simple, tender, rows of flowers that glowed as though holding the day's last light in their petals. Each blossom leaned toward the horizon, where the sun had just dipped, leaving only a hush of amber spread across the sky. The boy stepped inside. The grass bent gently beneath him, cool and soft, carrying the fragrance of things both remembered and forgotten. Birds did not sing here. Instead, there was a stillness, as though the garden itself were listening. At the center stood a pool of clear water, round and calm. When the boy leaned near, he did not see his reflection. He saw the faces of everyone he had loved, and everyone who had loved him in return. Not frozen, not distant, but alive, smiling, shining faintly in ripples that never broke. He felt no urge to speak. His chest filled with something larger than words, a quiet knowing that this was not an end, only a folding into peace. The boy lay down beside the pool, the flowers swaying gently at his side. Their glow softened as the sky dimmed, until everything, the garden, the air, the boy himself, seemed woven into one fabric of light and rest. Somewhere, he thought, there would always be a garden like this, waiting for every traveler, every dreamer, every wandering soul. And as his eyes closed, the last thought that drifted through him was simple. Everything had mattered, even the smallest part. The garden breathed once like a lullaby, and the boy's story folded into stillness. And with that, the tale drifts into the stars. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, my friend. Thank you for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man. The end.